thanks everyone for joining us today. This is our first conversation with KISI, so trying something new. You have to forgive us if we have any sort of technical issues. My name is Madison. I am one of KISI's marketing interns. I'm also a senior at IU, so I'm studying marketing at the Kelley School of Business. But I'm happy to be here, happy to try this out, and I want to thank Alex specifically for joining us today and being our guinea pig. How are you doing today, Alex?
I am doing really well. Thank you for asking. So my name is Alex Johnson. I graduated from IU just last year. Seems like it was yesterday sometimes. And now I work full-time as an asset management analyst at Inventorgy, which is a renewable energy company, which I can describe in more detail after we finish my introduction. So nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you too. So I know right now we're doing all the social distancing, so I'm calling in from the Chicago suburbs of Orland Park. Snow on the ground today, but so where are you calling in from?
I am calling in from Wheaton, Illinois, a different Chicago suburb out west, kind of by neighborhood.
Okay, and do you work out there too, or did you go back home?
I was living at home for the first year out of graduation anyway, save some money. So
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of my roommates are doing that too. It's a good plan.
so
Same boat.
the office itself is in Chicago, but we've been working at home for over a month. I think Illinois' shelter-in-place order started on March 23rd. So
Right.
It's been an adjustment for me, just like all of you with your classes.
Yeah, virtual classes has been very fun. Definitely something different. But yeah, speaking of school, I would love to hear kind of how you were involved in Kelley and KISI and kind of, what that looked like for you.
Definitely. So I was the president of Net Impact for 2 years, co-president, my junior and senior year. So that was the extent of my involvement with KISI. I really liked being involved with Net Impact, not only because it empowered me to help pursue various green initiatives on IU's campus, but it was also a really supportive community I could turn to when I decided that I was going to go on a less traditional career path and recruit in the energy or sustainability industry. Some of the highlights that I liked with KISI while I was president of Net Impact was working with the Lumina Foundation my junior year, which was an impact investing firm that came in and spoke to all of KISI. That was really cool. And then senior year, I helped procure an $86,000 grant to assess the waste practices of Indiana University. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, an event about that, kind of educating people on those results. And that was my thesis for Kelley Honors. So it was a big, sustainable senior year.
Yeah, it's like a huge part of your college experience.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Did you go into college knowing that you wanted to, do something in social impact? Did you know about Net Impact before going to college?
Not at all.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was similar for you guys, but the economy was kind of an interesting time when we were in around middle school, and they were really pushing like, oh my God, the stock market's crashed, everything's falling. And so I was like, I need to go to college and get a practical degree. That's
right.
what I was going to do. I thought I was going to go to Kelley and be a banker. Like that was my plan. And then I learned that I didn't like that at all. And instead found a super supportive community in Net Impact and made my decisions that way, going from there.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like everyone kind of comes to KISI in different ways, but that's really cool. I like how it's been, just a huge part of your life so far.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're 1 year out of school working for Inventorgy, so I'd love to hear kind of like what your job is like, how that year of work has been going for you.
Absolutely. So how I explain my role in Inventorgy is that I am the CFO of 2 small companies, and those small companies happen to be wind farms. So I make sure that we're paying all our bills, we're complying with all the laws, and we're operating our power plant safely. So that's kind of the baseline of my job that I do day to day. Some of my more interesting projects were selling one of my wind farms. I used to have 3. Now I have 2. because during my first 6 months, they were like, yeah, we got an interested buyer and we could make like millions of dollars on this. So drop everything and do an M&A.
That's huge in your first
Yeah,
year.
it is huge in the first year and definitely unexpected. So I advise KISI students, even if you think you're going to go work for some nonprofit that's not financial in any way, do pay attention to those finance classes, because I
Hmm.
had to look at the model of how much money we were proposing to sell this for. And I thought, oh, wow, this is some of the exact same pro forma NPV calculations that I really did have in class. So Kelly can be relevant, people. Keep
Pay
that,
attention, right? Yeah.
pay attention, keep that in mind. So selling the wind farm was kind of the biggest project. I also do some intern interviewing now, which has been really interesting, because it made me think that, wow, I wish more Kelly people would apply, because I think they would do better than some of the people that I'm interviewing with some of the skills they've gained in Compass and involvement they have in KISI. So those are kind of my day-to-day and bigger achievements over the course of my first year.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Do you want to give us more of like a brief explanation of everything that inventorgy does?
Sure. So the big inventorgy line that you'll see all over the website if you research it is that we develop, build, own, and operate renewable energy facilities. And what that means is we're involved in every step of building and running a power plant. So development is more like, let's find some land
Hmm.
to put our turbines on. Let's assess whether there's going to be enough wind or sun to put our facilities. Then it's construction, which is similar to constructing a building. Owning is owning, and then operating is what I do. So ensuring that we're producing power and building a more sustainable world and powering people with turbines and solar panels instead of big bad oil.
Yeah, that's
So that's a
awesome. I
little
mean,
bit
who would
about
have
it.
thought to themselves, I'm going to own or like operate wind farms, right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and so are you working specifically only in wind for right now?
Yeah, so we divide it by resource. So I
Okay.
only do wind, but there are other people that do our solar or our storage. Storage is really interesting for you energy nerds out there, because they're essentially large batteries that are going to be the key to implementing renewables further across the country, because the sun goes down and the wind isn't blowing all of the time. So if you store energy inside of these batteries, you can keep that power that the wind and the sun are generating over the course of the day when people aren't using it as much, and dispatch it at night. Not surprisingly, keeping and storing energy in giant batteries is super, super hard. There's a lot of people working on that. And whoever comes up with the biggest solution, I think, is probably going to make a ton of money.
Right.
But we do have some storage. And one guy does all of our storage because he was a former electrical engineer and knows how all of that complicated stuff works. So,
Wow, that's very cool.
yeah.
So when you started this job, did you know a lot about, sustainable energy or wind turbines in particular? Like, was that an onboarding process that took some time?
It definitely took some time. So I was fortunate to have interned with the company my junior year and then decided to come back full time. So it was kind of less of an
Okay.
abrupt transition as it would have been had I just came straight out of college.
Hmm.
But I knew I wanted to work in renewable energy, but I didn't know how a wind turbine or a solar panel worked. And that was a lot of learning on the job, having people refer to me, not having people refer me to various resources, whether that was internet articles or internal explanations from our engineers, as to how it all worked. The financial stuff was a bit easier to catch onto because, like I said, Kelly is relevant.
Hmm.
But I enjoyed the challenge of kind of learning the science and engineering part of it because it was different than what I was used to. And felt like I was growing and learning something new every day instead of kind of being in a rut.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a lot going on. I mean, it's a pretty dynamic industry with a lot of change right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts are, maybe some of the challenges or opportunities right now.
In renewables specifically?
Sure, or even something specific to Invenergy, either of those.
Um, so the coronavirus, everybody's
Right.
talking about the
Yeah.
coronavirus. I get a little tired of the coronavirus. I'm sure you guys do too. But at least from the operating perspective, a wind turbine technician and a solar technician are some of the most essential of the essential workers that you could really have. So over the past month, we've been working at Invenergy to make sure that these people can safely get to their sites and power their communities. And
Hmm.
that's involved switching around their schedule, making sure fewer people are in contact with each other, kind of making sure that anybody that comes onto our sites to help us fix a component part or do our cleaning is really strongly vetted on making sure that they aren't sick. So that's kind of been the more immediate local impact to the renewable energy industry. Where people are worried going forward is kind of developing these new projects. Obviously, we want to do that, but with all of this uncertainty and people using less power because businesses aren't turning their lights on,
Right.
banks are kind of less ready to hand us over some money for a big loan to start construction on something when everybody has no idea how long these impacts to the economy are going to be and whether people are actually going to be able to get out on the field and build the wind farm. So um, those are kind of the bigger challenges in the industry. Hopefully that answers your question well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's crazy how much, COVID-19 is truly affecting everything,
Yeah.
Yeah, more than one would assume, but
Mhm.
yeah. But going back to how you got started with Invenergy, I'm kind
Mhm.
of curious, like how you found that, what made you interested in them in general.
Yeah. Um, so I kind of pursued a bit of a bifurcated recruiting process my junior year. I decided that I was still going to recruit and interview with some of the more traditional Kelly companies um, to kind of test out how I would be at interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I knew that many of these sustainability jobs were more difficult to find and recruited later. So I didn't want my first interview out of the gate to be at a company that I really wanted and had invested a lot in, and then I would come in super nervous. So I started out kind of doing the traditional Kelly route, and then over that time, I performed a lot of research on my own, literally top 10 energy companies by city, top sustainability firms in my area, and prepared my Excel spreadsheet, followed up with people, connected on LinkedIn, did many informational interviews, and kind of narrowed down my list that way until finding Invenergy and going through their interview process. So if I were to advise anybody that kind of wanted to go down that alternative career path, I would say you've got to be really diligent in making sure that you're keeping track of the places that you want to apply to. And it does take a little more effort to reach out to people that work at the company on LinkedIn and kind of get yourself noticed amid that giant pile of applications. And then reach out to someone in the UCSO that can kind of help you hold yourself accountable towards that plan that you're building. Um, so, even though they might not have connections at every single company that you looked at, they might have some, and it's always good to check in as a sanity check with a professional and say, hey, I've done all these things and I'm struggling to get in contact with these few companies. What do you advise next? Because it's hard to not get what you want right away, especially seeing some of your friends who might get the easy drag and drop on Kelly Connect and now have all their
Mm-hmm.
interviews with PWs. And so you're like, what am I doing in comparison? Why don't I have a job? It takes some self-confidence and definitely builds strength of character to kind of go down your own way. But I would say it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned that when you first went into college, you were kind of looking for like a safety net traditional career, a banker, right?
Mhm.
So when did that kind of transition where you were looking for something that fit more into your interests and values?
Well, I knew freshman year, I was in the ACE program. I don't know if you guys know everybody in the ACE program, but everybody was super motivated to go into these banking and consulting sort of things and join a lot of clubs. And I went to
Hmm.
some of those things and I realized that it wasn't for me, which was fine. Um, but I found a KISI event, and even though I wasn't necessarily interested in sustainability, everybody at Net Impact was super kind to me and inviting and really wanted to hear my ideas on making the club better. So it's kind of spending time with those people my freshman and sophomore year and doing some research on my own and talking with professors really helped me solidify that I wanted to go into sustainability or energy to kind of make my impact right away out of school. Once
Hmm.
I had approached that critical, like junior, senior year decision time point.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned LinkedIn was one of the biggest tools that you
Yeah.
used for job searching. Would you say that was like the biggest one, or like what techniques do you think really paid off for you?
First, just kind of brunt Google searching and looking at business journals by city.
Hmm.
So the reason I found Inventorgy was literally top 10 energy companies in Chicago, and that was one on the list. And then I researched it further. Um, it helps when you're starting to build a bigger list rather than a smaller one.
Right.
So once you've researched it further, you could realize, oh, you know, like the positions they have open don't really align with my skill set. I can cross this off my list instead of like worrying that you only have 3 items on your list and all three don't work for you. And then you're like,
Hmm.
oh no. So that was kind of the first big step. And then LinkedIn was more once I decided on companies that I really liked. So some of the advantage of a site like Kelly Connect is that there's Kelly alumni that come right to you that want to talk to you and answer your questions at these companies. And LinkedIn is the way that you can kind of bridge that gap for yourself. So there might not be a representative from this company coming to Kelly, but there might be a Kelly alumni that currently works there that would be open to talking to you about their experience and help you kind of suss out whether that company is for you. And that serves um, as an extra benefit because that person can go to HR and say, like, wow, you know, I talked to this super cool person on the phone and she seems really interested in interning for our company. And they might notice you in that way because you've reached out to multiple people that are already there and have a more informed experience before you interview. So I know LinkedIn is tough and can seem like shameless self promotion, but there is a way to be on LinkedIn and seek people out without being annoying or pushy about it. I promise.
Yeah, I feel like from my own personal experience, recruitment has been a huge numbers game. And so getting
Mm-hmm.
that big list and then leveraging like any connection you can find through
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn or otherwise. Did you have any connections with Invenergy, or did you mostly just do like informational interviews and things like that?
It was just informational interviews. I knew nobody at Invenergy. So
Wow, no IU alums?
yeah, there was only one IU alum that was working for two actually in the entire like 500 person plus company.
Crazy, yeah.
So yeah, I found both of them and talked to them, and they referred me to one other person, and that was kind of the experience. So um, I definitely didn't expect to make it further along in the interview process because I didn't have as strong as of a connection as somebody else might. But I think that
Hmm.
gives inspiration to others that you can do it,
Yeah,
uh, even if you don't have a best friend that's already working
true.
there.
And maybe, I'd love to hear like why specifically Invenergy, and did you have like other companies that you were kind of considering or deciding between?
Yeah. So I considered other consulting companies, other energy companies, and energy consulting companies. And each of them had their pros and cons that I wrote down on my weighted average list. If you can't tell already, I really like to be prepared and optimize myself. But after I kind of checked in with myself, I developed the factors that I wanted most in a company. And that was the ability to make a tangible impact since day one. The second was enjoying the colleagues that I worked with. And the third was, what was the third? Oh, being challenged uniquely every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I evaluated inventorgy versus these other companies in those three metrics, they came out on top. So I don't know if it would help you to learn more about why the others weren't as good, or if that's like enough to answer that question.
I mean, I think that's decent. If anyone has any questions later on at the end, like feel free to ask about this if you're curious about more about the industry or anything along those lines. But yeah, I guess I would love to hear maybe, I know you mentioned some of the big projects like selling a wind farm, but were there any other projects, maybe something that was more difficult, that like your biggest challenge or anything like that, that would be interesting to share?
Just the transition from being in college to working full time is a bit more jarring than you would expect in itself, because I was very used to having a regimented day in school. And then when you go to work, it's 9 to 5 and then you're done. You've got like nothing else to study for, nothing else to do. But you are expected to be at work, planning your time kind of accordingly. So that was a bit of a challenge, but I succeeded in that. One of the great things about inventorgy is that there's a lot of young people at the company because they tend to be drawn to sustainable causes. So I made some friends easily with people that either interned with me and came back, or were in their first couple years out of school. So that was nice. My other big challenge was budgeting. So budget season was last summer, and you can imagine that there are a lot of things that you need to budget for to run a power plant. So
right.
Kind of
it's a complicated balance sheet.
Yeah. Giving myself like a crash course in, oh my gosh, what is everything that I need to budget for? How do I account for this? Definitely helped me learn a lot rather quickly, especially because I had to budget and sell a wind farm at the same time. So
right.
That was pretty big.
Sounds like it has been an amazing experience for you thus far. Obviously, you've done some really cool things that I don't think many people a year out of college can say they've done, which is awesome. And I feel like you've had a really cool journey also to kind of get you there. One that's not the traditional Kelly route, but that's been supported. And I think that's awesome that you were able to find something that really like fit into your values. I think before we kind of wrap up and like open up our Q&A session, if you have any kind of final words of advice to someone who maybe wants to follow in your footsteps or isn't doing the traditional Kelly recruitment, like what advice would you have for them?
First, recognize that you're not alone in your pursuit of wanting to do something different, and that there are plenty of resources that are ready and willing to help you if you only ask. Courtney and the KISI staff are helpful in terms of not only motivation and encouragement, but maybe they know folks in the nonprofit or business world like me that can kind of help you along and get you that first step in the door. Similarly, there's professors and the UCSO who can be super helpful in orienting you and getting you on the right path. But if you do kind of ever get discouraged, just remember that you need to stick to your plan and keep trying and reach out, and eventually things will turn out okay, as they do in life, if you're putting in the right effort.
Yeah, I love the positivity. I think we all need it right now, particularly, but that's great to hear. So I would like to open it up to any questions from the audience. Feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask verbally, or you can use the chat room and I will monitor that and ask for you. But if anyone has any thoughts or questions, feel free to ask now. And I think, honestly, I'm kind of curious. I'm happy to kind of open this up, but I know you mentioned how COVID-19 is kind of affecting the technicians and things like that, and obviously you're working from home.
Yeah.
How have you personally been impacted in your career, like with COVID going on?
What's been tougher is kind of orienting myself on what I really should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
because I was really happy that I've been managing both of my wind farms well financially. We're going to be okay. We can weather out the next few months. But what's difficult is that it's harder to kind of compare questions with how my colleagues are managing their wind farms in other areas of the country,
Mm-hmm.
or if there's any way that I could be doing better while we're all kind of working from home. Instead of being in the office where it was like, hey, I could talk to the person next to me. I ran into this issue. How did you go about that and resolve it? It takes more of that extra mental resolve to send somebody a message or pick up the phone. And I think that everybody is really anxious right now to be sure that we're doing our best, not only for the technicians, but for our personal careers to continue developing and not be getting lazy at home because there isn't somebody
Right.
monitoring you every second to be sure that you are on task. So that's been kind of my life, trying to make sure that I am dotting my I's and crossing my T's and getting everything in place without that extra support net that I'm used to.
Yeah. It's hard not to feel like the world is stagnant right now.
Yeah.
But I know even with online classes, it's important to kind of keep motivated and continue learning. Like it's only a few weeks left and
Yeah.
I'm graduating, so got to make it worth it. But yeah, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask now. But otherwise, I want to thank you, Alex, for coming on. I feel like this has been great. I've enjoyed our conversation, and our first conversation with KISI was pretty
Yeah,
successful. So I feel like that went really well. But
definitely. I agree.
yeah, anyone who's listening in or views this later, I would love to hear your feedback on, what you thought worked or maybe potential topics or people you'd like to talk to in the future. And you're free to reach out to KISI's email for kisi@indiana.edu, and KISI is KISI. So we'd love to hear back from you and kind of, just your thoughts on how you thought this went. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming.